The Rock Whisperer. Do you hear the earth talking to you?
Section 7-10, Landscape Development. I believe in your note packets it might say 7-9 again, so please make that change. So when we talk about our landscape development, we're kind of wrapping up what we've talked about as far as weather, erosion, and deposition. So what features are we talking about? Well, we can have plains, which are going to be like the Midwest where we're growing lots of crops. We can have sharp, jagged mountains. We can have valleys. Notice U-shaped valley here. This particular valley was probably formed by a glacier. And we can have plateaus. Looks like it might be the Grand Canyon. So what are some of those major features that we just talked about? We can refer to them as far as their gradient, their elevation, and what structures do they form. So mountains obviously have high relief, high up. They're relatively steep in their gradient, especially when they're first formed. And they contain lots of layers of rocks. And those rocks, when they hit and push against each other, they get tilted, they get folded, and then they get lifted up. Plateau, we know, is going to have high relief, but they're going to have horizontal layers, and they're going to be undisturbed. So we're going to have pretty level slope in that particular area. We may have some steep valleys where things have been carved out around there. And again, the Grand Canyon is a great example of that. And then plains, very low relief, little change, going to be flat. And that's usually where there were once mountains, but they've been eroded away over time. So what are the factors of landscape development? So first we can have uplift. We're moving things up. We're constructing new land. So we have forces beneath the earth as the plates are moving, and we have earthquakes, volcanic activity. When those plates hit, things get pushed up, just like it shows here in the diagram. Then we have leveling forces that are destructive, that are taking it back down. And those are going to be our weather, erosion, and deposition, which it shows here. And those are going to kind of bring things back down. So over time, we may look like over here on the right-hand side of the picture. Kind of similar to the old stage of streams. We kind of can go through that particular life cycle. So in this particular diagram slide, we have talking about the stages. Just like we talked about the stream, we had youth, maturity, and old age. Same thing with mountains. When they're young, they're high. They have very steep slopes. There's a lot of uplifting as they're being created. And when there are streams, they're going to flow very rapidly. They're going to flow usually pretty straight, just like we talked about with the streams. That would be this picture right here, showing a picture of the Rocky Mountains. They're very young mountains. As time progresses, mountains start to mature. They'll have more of a rugged landscape. They start to lower in elevation, and that's because the leveling process is going to be working more than the uplift process. And then the picture we have here on the right shows a picture of the Adirondack Mountains. And they're somewhere between the maturity or maybe even old age. And what's happened is you have lower elevations. You can see they're not nearly as sharp and jagged on the tops of the mountains as the Rocky Mountains, and that's because of all the weathering and erosion that's gone on. So leveling is more dominant than uplift. You have low stream velocity in a lot of these areas, and the land is pretty close to sea level. So, even though the Adirondacks are older, they're probably more towards the mature level because we're not at sea level. There's still some pretty high elevations going on. And then the last step is we can go through rejuvenation. That's where after thousands, millions of years, we can have uplift occurring again, and our elevation starts to change. We have new valleys that are forming with the plate tectonics occurring. Climate can be a major factor in what's happening with our landscape. So we have an arid landscape like this wonderful diagram down here. We can see that we have some steep, sharp angles. Okay, there's not a lot going on to hold in vegetation in those particular areas. So we have pretty unique, distinct landscape for those. Compared to a humid area where all our features are going to be more rounded. And you can think about this diagram here as far as things being more rounded. You have more vegetation to hold sediments in place. And I put this in here because glaciation, even though it's not a climate factor, showed some of the great things that when we talk about landscape features. U-shaped valley. Here is a picture of striations in the bedrock. If you want some better pictures, you can just Google search striations. Penny is here for scale, so you can see how big those are. Those are grooves or scratches. Sometimes the rocks almost look polished in that area. You can see a lot of terminal moraine or it's unsorted till. And again, that's how Cape Cod and Long Island were formed. And last thing that we need to take into consideration is what is the human impact on the land? What about our human population? We're over 7 billion people. That has an impact on the landscape. We move mountains. We do different things in order to influence what we're going on. Denudation is the loss of soil or trees over time due to human activities. So that can be something that's occurring. And I kind of found this picture that shows a little bit of what's going on, not necessarily due to human activities, but we can see that we would have a old volcano here, and over time the outer layers are going to be eroded away, and what's left at the end is the volcanic neck where that igneous rock is. What else is going to impact? The carbon dioxide that's in the area, or carbon monoxide, the chemicals that are in the air can have an influence on the landscape. More acid rain can eat away at the stuff and change the environment. Also the pesticides. How is that going to affect our food web that we have? Food webs are always very complicated. They used to be food chains, but now we realize it's more of a web and things are interconnected. And if pesticides are affecting one thing or another, whether it's the grass or the animals, that's going to affect possibly the organic material in that particular area. So we can see that the landscape changed over time due to our weather, erosion, and deposition. But as human beings, we also can have a pretty substantial impact on how that's going to look.
Don't forget to listen to the earth. You just may hear it speak to you.